Ever wonder what a big government trade policy really has to do with your morning coffee? Well, as it turns out, pretty much everything. Today, we're going to trace the journey of a single decision and see how it ripples from international ports right into your wallet. Let's get into it.
It all kicks off with this number, 50%. Just let that sink in. Imagine a 50% tax suddenly gets slapped on the world's biggest coffee supplier right as it's trying to sell to one of its biggest customers. That's the tariff we're talking about. And believe me, the fallout was immediate.
So this is really the core question, isn't it? What actually happens when Brazilian coffee becomes 50% more expensive to bring into the US overnight? The answer, well, it's not simple, and it sets off a domino effect through the entire global supply chain.
Okay, so let's trace that first ripple. The moment this 50% tariff was announced, the whole system reacted, but probably not in the way you'd expect.
You'd think there'd be this mad dash, this panic buying, right? But US importers and roasters, they did the exact opposite. They just stopped. See, most of them already had about 1 to 2 months worth of coffee beans sitting in their warehouses. So the game plan became, use what we have, wait this thing out, and hope for a better deal down the line. But that decision to wait in the US created an instant crisis down in Brazil. That pause in the US created immediate gridlock at Brazilian ports. With nobody buying, the whole export system just started to seize up. It was like a massive traffic jam, but with coffee. And just look at these numbers. Brazilian coffee exports completely plunged, down over 28% in July compared to the year before. But here's the craziest part. This happened before the tariffs were even officially implemented. Just the threat of the policy was enough to grind the entire market to a halt.
And this wasn't some abstract problem. It had a very real, direct financial cost. For every single bag of coffee an exporter in Brazil had to delay, they were losing about $10. Now multiply that by thousands and thousands of bags, you're talking about absolutely devastating losses.
And that financial pressure, it didn't stay at the ports in Brazil. It basically traveled with the coffee beans all the way to Main Street, USA, where local businesses were next in line to feel that squeeze. Industry experts immediately started sounding the alarm. They warned that the cost just to get coffee into the country could jump by as much as 30%. An increase like that, it doesn't just get absorbed by a business, it gets passed on.
And this is where it starts to get real for all of us. For your local coffee shop, maybe one just like those in New York, the choice became agonizing. Do you eat these massive new costs and risk going out of business, or do you pass them straight on to your customers?
Which brings us to the final stop in this whole chain reaction, your wallet. Suddenly, this international trade dispute isn't some abstract headline in the news anymore. It's about how much you're actually paying for your daily cup.
And you have to remember, this was all happening in a market that was already getting pricey. Even before this new tariff hit, U.S. coffee prices had already jumped 14.5% over the last year. So this new policy was basically like pouring gasoline on a fire that was already burning.
But look, this isn't just a story about Brazil and the United States. A disruption this big, in a market this huge, sends ripples across the entire globe. It affects markets and trade patterns everywhere. To really get why, you have to appreciate Brazil's scale. We're talking about a country that produces over a third of the world's coffee. It's an absolute titan. You can't just go out and find a substitute for that kind of volume, for that specific flavor profile, overnight. It's pretty much impossible.
So what happens to all that coffee that's no longer going to the US? It has to go somewhere. So trade patterns are literally being redrawn in real time. Those Brazilian beans are now being rerouted to new places, like China and the European Union, where these tariffs don't exist. And in the middle of all this, we have to remember the human cost. Because at the very, very beginning of this supply chain are the small-scale coffee farmers in Brazil. And they are by far the most vulnerable. They rely on the US market, and now they're facing collapsing demand and rising costs. For so many of them, the fear is real that they might have to give up farming coffee altogether. So let's just put it all together. A single tariff creates this incredible cascade of consequences. For US importers, it means higher costs. For cafes, it squeezes margins. For you, the consumer, it's higher prices. The global market gets destabilized,
And at the very start of it all, Brazilian farmers could face financial ruin. Absolutely no one is untouched here. It's a powerful reminder of just how interconnected our world really is. A single decision can actually change the price of something you buy every single day. So the real question to think about is this: if it can happen at coffee, what else in your shopping cart could be next?